I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, September 26, 2017. Laura, could you please call the roll?
Belval. Benford. Fuqua.
Here.
Garcia. Here. Gebhardt. Marquis. Here. Myers.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to always remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening. Welcome everybody in the audience and folks watching at home. Glad to have you with us. We'll begin as always with the superintendent's report. Good evening, Dr. Stevenson.
Good evening. This is a little bit long, but you had asked about class size at the high school level. So I'm going to give you a report on the class size at the high school level. So please be patient with me. So for the 17-18 school year, you created a priority for high schools to limit class sizes to 30 students in 9th and 10th grades within on-level language arts and math courses. In language arts, the courses include Language Arts 9 and Language Arts 10. In mathematics, the courses are Algebra 1 and Geometry. As schools set out to create their schedules, class sizes of 30 and below were largely met for the 17-18 school year. I do have charts which I can send you tomorrow for your review, which would give you class sizes across the school district by school as well as by aggregate. There are a number of factors to consider as you review the attached data, the data that I will send you. Several principals requested additional FTE beyond their initial allocation in order to meet the class size guidance of 30 or below in these targeted classes. It was not necessary to dip into the district reserves in order to fund these class sizes. Schools are still in the process of balancing their classes as well as providing accurate student attendance data as we approach the ever-present October count. While the numbers provided are the most accurate to date, it is possible that these class sizes might continue to drift downward. It is nearly impossible to completely balance all classes due to the complexity of scheduling many courses and student requests at the high school level. Even with class sizes above 31, in a very few cases, it is prohibitive in staffing allocations and sections to create additional sections. For example, splitting a class with 32 students creates a staffing problem because you end up with classes of 2 of 15 or 16. Principals were mindful of the Board of Education guidance of 30 students or lower in these targeted classes, and they worked hard to create the best schedules possible at their respective schools. Overall, the objective to maintain class size at 30 or under in 9th and 10th grades on level English and math classes were largely achieved. Principals will continue to look at class sizes to ensure that there are effective teacher-to-student ratios. And I will send you charts tomorrow.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
No, we've had the fun getting school going and going to schools, but no, that's our big news for tonight.
We appreciate that. Board members, questions or comments for the superintendent based on her report? Tina? And then Tom?
Yeah, during the class size exercise, did the class sizes in 11th and 12th go up, or did those stay stable?
I'm going to turn to Mark Schaefer. Did 11th and 12th grade go up, or were we able to sustain those?
Okay.
They're sustained.
Okay, and then I had sent a question over at some point about school size and school capacity, because I noticed some of the schools in my district went up in enrollment this year, and I was just curious. And there's also some last-minute staffing, I think, at Centennial, because they had an ingress of students that might have been unexpected. So I was just wondering if we could hear about that sometime soon.
Of course. So let me make sure I understand the question. So the question is, were our enrollment projections accurate given the staffing that was in the building, or did we have to increase the staffing after enrollment came in?
Yes, and are we approaching capacity? Because I thought we were at capacity at some of those schools, and they all increased
Okay.
this year. So I was just curious, when is Boulder High at capacity?
Okay.
I think it went to 2,047 or something like that this year, and it went up. And it's just, I'm kind of curious. I do hear that from my community
Okay.
from time to time.
What I will do tomorrow is get the enrollment, well, do you want the enrollment now, or do you want us to wait till we finish the
I've got the
October camp?
enrollment. I'm just curious, like long-term
Long
planning.
term.
Are we,
Okay,
because I'm seeing the schools grow every year.
okay.
And I'm assuming at some point they can't grow anymore.
Okay.
So,
Let us get those numbers tomorrow, and as to what the enrollment is and what the enrollment change has been. And the difficulty will be, it won't reflect the one-day count.
correct.
Okay.
And then I do have a count question. Do students have to be physically at school, or if they know they're going to be absent, can they write a note to their principal so that they can be counted?
Generally, with the one-day count, we can accept a letter from a parent, a note from a parent that says they're out this day because of an excused absence,
Okay.
illness, or whatever.
Thank you.
And then they are counted as enrolled.
Okay,
Cindy, thanks for that. It's good to hear a report on that. And when you send us that material, will it detail about some of the impediments to reaching those class sizes? And if not, I'm curious to know, is it more, for example, beyond FTE that would cause some restrictions, like actually physical space or something like that? As far as I'm concerned, if we had to go down to class sizes of 16 and 17 because of the split, I'd be fine with that. I know it costs more staff, but I've always been a proponent of the lower class sizes. And the reason, at least my reasons for wanting to do this, was that our proficiency in math and literacy, if you look at ninth grade scores, and as we move through high school, they're not that great. And so this was a attempt to let's try getting the class sizes down, a little bit more personalized instruction, a little bit more help, and I also know that a lot of students at the high schools come there obviously with deficiencies that we need to make up. Mm-hmm. So it would be good not only to get that information, but also then to track it over the year to see, is this a strategy that's really working for us? There's good research around it, but how are we experiencing that, and what do we learn as we go through the year in doing this would be good.
I think what you'd find is that most of the educational research tells you that the first and foremost, most important variable is the very well-trained teacher. And the very well-trained teacher is going to be what makes a difference in the achievement of students. Generally, what the findings are is class size does not have a huge impact. However, what class size does is it gives teachers more time for relationships, more time for parent contact. So it depends on what variables you're looking at. If we use test scores, if we use student achievement, class size has not really been shown to impact that to any great extent compared to the quality of the teacher. However, we all know parents and teachers and kids appreciate a smaller class size. They get more attention.
Yeah, I would certainly like to share the research I've collected on that, because it actually does not say that. The research I've collected says even the class size of one lower makes an incremental impact on the performance of all the students in that class. I know there are a lot of variables, a lot of factors. It's hard to do research like that because you got varying levels of
Right.
quality of teachers. But I know from helping in classrooms, and of course my wife is a classroom teacher, how busy it gets if you have lots
Absolutely.
of students. So it'd be interesting for us to
Yeah.
get a mark on this.
Sure.
Yeah.
And why don't I pull some of the research for all of you? And it is, I remember, I taught school for 13 years, and it makes a difference when you have fewer kids. What it does not seem to make a difference on is the actual achievement on, for example, statewide test scores. When you look at some other factors in classrooms, it can make a difference in time the teacher has, how much attention kids get, how much attention parents get. That's where you see the variables.
Yeah.
So let me, over the weekend, I will find some of the latest research and get it to all of you.
Yeah. And what I'd like to do, Sam, we've been talking about this for years, literally,
Yeah.
is to have a really good open discussion around class
Yeah.
sizes, work sessions, hear from parents, hear from our community.
Oh, people like it.
Yeah.
The other thing the research shows is that it really, until you get down to about 15, that's where you start seeing the academic differences. So I neglected to say that. So when you're, most of the time in school districts, what we're working with is 30, 25. Sometimes you can get it down to 21, 22, 23. But your differences come in when you get to 15, is what the research tells you.
Yeah.
That's, most school districts don't have resources that allow us to do that.
Yeah, I'd like you to see the research I found. In fact, Tina's one that pointed me to it a couple of years ago. But it doesn't say that at all. It says their studies that they did was incremental, and getting down to 15 is good and is the best, but even getting down 1 or 2 lower is good too. So I just want to have a good conversation on that, yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Jenny?
And I would suggest, this is a budget problem for a future board, but I would suggest, given the resources we have and acknowledging that we've really put a lot of resources into a highly qualified teaching staff, that if we really wanted to help our achievement, we might target resources at the students who need it the most, which wouldn't be just in decreasing class sizes across the board, would be targeting our at-risk population with additional teaching resources. And and I think that would probably be the best way to get the most bang for our buck out of our teaching, the amount of resources we have.
Jenny, you've brought up a really important point, because one of the things when you consider class size is you do have to look at the learners. So if you have a class of students who English is not their first language, and you're going to be responsible for sustaining their skills in Spanish and making sure they can emerge speaking English, that's a different case than when you have 25 children who speak English and are, well cared for. So it's, yeah. So you've brought up a really good point.
That is a place where we've seen the
Right.
most difficulty, or where we would like to see more improvement
Right.
in our test scores.
Right. I think that's an important point. Who's the student?
So I think when we went through the agenda setting exercise with Heather, that class size was our second highest ranked item. And it sounds to me like, we're all on agenda setting now, that we should schedule that workshop prior to your leaving the board. Yeah, that's what, I was just thinking, well, Tom has been wanting to do that for 8 years, so, so maybe we should try to, from an agenda perspective, try to get that done, since we've already ranked it highly as a board, and then we can do that. So that does put a time constraint on us before November 28th.
Took the words out of my mouth. And if you have additional questions for the superintendent, maybe like your question, Tina, follow up with an email. You're going to share some research, Cindy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Give me the weekend.
And then we will
I'll have it to you by next week.
get a discussion calendared on that. Other questions or comments for the superintendent based on her report? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is public hearing and public participation. Laura, has anyone signed up this evening?
No one has signed up.
Okay, we'll move to the next item on our agenda, board communication. Board members, who would like to begin? Kathy?
I'd like to report that Jenny and I went to the CASB Board of Directors meeting on Friday and Saturday, and we had a very informative presentation by Dr. Elliot Asp on the history of the accountability system and some new accountability projects that are going on around the state that I'm happy to share at a later date, but it was very interesting and exciting to think about how Colorado might be looking at holding schools and districts accountable in a new way, in addition to what we're already doing. So those meetings were really interesting. And then last night was the Region 5 meeting, and there was a very interesting presentation by Representative Dave Young, who is from Greeley, and he's going to almost every regional meeting across the state. He's term limited, and he's impressive in that he really is listening and trying to find out what the most pressing issues are for the education community. So it was really nice to see him there and to have him engage with the community. And we also got to meet the new state board member, Rebecca McClellan, who was also equally impressive in her presentation and her comments. So I just wanted to, Jenny's going to add to this because I can't read her lips. So Jane Goff was there as well, but I'd met Jane before. Rebecca was the new state board member. So I just wanted to give the kudos to Representative Young for making that effort to travel around the state and listen to school boards, because you don't hear that very often from legislators. So it was a nice a nice way to do the Region 5 meeting.
Thanks, Kathy. We appreciate you and Jenny keeping us informed about some of these CASB meetings that we can't all attend. Other comments, board members? Tom?
So I won't steal your thunder here, Sam, because I know you want to say a little bit about Emerald, but that was a very nice ribbon cutting ceremony, but I'll let you talk about that. What I'd like to talk is thank Rob for giving me a personal tour before the ribbon cutting. He walked me around. I got there early and got to see all the things and heard from the guy that really knows about it. So thank you so much.
Well, I got to tell you, Rob knows a lot, but there's a fourth grader named Paxton at Emerald Elementary who gave me a tour of every room in the building, and he knew exactly what each room was used for, explained how the carpet was for collaboration, the linoleum was for small groups. I hope I got that right, Paxton. I'm sorry if I didn't, but it was wonderful to see all the students so excited about their new space, because it really is fantastic. Same with Creekside, attended that as well, and just so much excitement amongst the kids, the staff, and the parents and neighborhood about these new facilities, and we look forward to touring them during the daytime when we can see the work in action. And Tom joined me at Emerald, and I know all of you were there in spirit. It was really fabulous. Douglas is tomorrow night, right? Thursday night. Thanks. Richard.
A couple of things. I want to thank Rob, too, for setting up a meeting at Centaurus High School that I went to go visit, because I was curious to see how the construction was going on at Centaurus, and it seemed like it's moving along. There's a lot of moving parts at Centaurus right now, and it's great to see how they're keeping the students busy and working and taking care of all the containment around the asbestos and everything that's going on there. So thanks, Rob. The other thing, too, is I think it was during, September the 15th, 14th or something like that. I attended Peak to Peak because, and I want to say this, Peak to Peak has a very small number of Latino families in there, Latino students. However, they're making a big effort to be real inclusive of the Latino parents that they have at that particular school. And they created what they call their Latino parent leadership team there at Peak to Peak, and the administration there working very, very closely with them and acknowledging the fact that they need to do a lot more, especially around getting more Latino students in their school, especially when they're surrounded by the Latino community there at Peak to Peak. So I just want to, give kudos to them for at least doing what they're doing at this point.
Thanks, Richard. Other comments, board members? Jenny?
So I will piggyback on what Kathy said about CASB and say that I have, if anybody's interested, Dave Young gave a handout to us, and I can give it, I think I brought it with me, and I'll give it to Laura, and she can copy it for board members who might be interested. And there's also a slide deck available from Elliot Asp's presentation for those that went out today to CASB board members, and I'd be happy to forward that if there's any interest. It was a good presentation. And then there's also, one of the things we picked up that I thought some people might be interested in is there's a Safe Schools Summit. CASB board has representation on the Colorado Safe Schools something. And there's a Safe Schools Summit taking place on October the 18th, 17th, and 18th, I believe, over at the Adams 12 district headquarters or education center, and it had looked like a lot of interesting speakers. And then another comment I'm going to make was one of the topics of conversation, and it's coming up a lot at our schools this year too, is on the social and emotional well-being of students in our different districts. And I have to say, I was really impressed at the number of small districts represented by board members on our board who had already managed to provide counselors in their elementary schools for far longer than we have. So I was impressed, yeah, because it's not an easy budgetary decision to make, as I know we've really struggled with it. And on that note, I'd like to say that I've been visiting the schools in my director district, and I finally visited my last one on Monday. It's sort of my valedictory round. And I would like to say, one of the things I've been hearing is, thank you for the counselors we have provided for our elementary schools, and we can always use more counselor time, so, you know, the schools love it, and I've heard people say that counselors have already been there to help handle emotionally fraught situations when the principals were out of the building, and that they've been grateful for that. And I'd also like to say that for the schools in my director district that do not have full-day kindergarten, I'm hearing a real need for that. And I don't know where we are on that. I thought we had some work going on. That's sort of a question, actually, because I thought we had work going on in that area, and we're headed towards some kind of proposal for not this school year, but next school year maybe, but I don't know what happened to that work.
I don't know, but I'll do some research tomorrow. What I do know is that, as you probably all know, the state did increase funding for kindergartners, but they increased it by 0.08. And that doesn't really cover very many full-day kindergarten classes. So through my experience before and what I've heard here is kindergartners are going, and sometimes they're there for a longer day. It's half kindergarten and half enrichment in many of the buildings. Some have full day, but the funding at this point does not cover full day for all students. You can do tuition-based.
Right, but we don't
Yeah.
do tuition-based
Yeah.
in our district.
Right.
The kindergarten enrichment is not the same
Right,
thing.
right.
And I'm just hearing that there's a real need for that. I
It
hear
would be
kindergarten
wonderful.
teachers say, I don't
Yeah.
have time to teach everything
Yeah.
I need to teach. And I hear principals say, I'm losing kids to schools that
right.
can offer, or to
Right.
preschool, to private preschool programs that can offer a
Right.
full-day kindergarten. And so.
I
there's
think it's
apparently-
that next wave for K-12 education.
Oh, I
do.
think we should have been providing it years ago, and
Yeah.
I will look forward to us. And I understand why we haven't, and I understand the blocks, but it's time. It's
Yeah.
time. And I'd also like to say, I was very sorry to miss the Emerald ribbon cutting yesterday, because that's my director district. But I did, Samara Williams took me on a tour last week, and it's a beautiful building. And not only is the building itself really, really beautiful, but the energy and excitement that's inside the building, of the staff inside the building, from little things like, well, not such little things, like the first grade teachers have been working on collaborating, and they've put together their classroom libraries, which are all out in the central collaboration space, so that if you had a new teacher who had no classroom library, those kids wouldn't get penalized because they have the books all out there. And the teachers upstairs are working together so that some teachers, to combine groups even across grade levels, and using all that collaboration space. And just the energy is very exciting. And I've seen a lot of energy in our buildings with the innovation spaces, even if they don't get a whole new building. So I'd like to say that I recognize the energy and excitement in our buildings that are not so new as well. And the bond work has been, I think it's gone really smoothly. For all the complaints I've passed on to Rob, I think it's gone really smoothly, and people seem to be really pleased and excited, from smaller projects up to larger ones. And so I'd like to thank our bond staff for that. I think that's all I've got to report. I will try to remember to pass on the information from CASB if people are interested.
Thanks, Jenny. And Kathy?
Just want to add on to what Jenny said. There was a very good discussion about the difference between having social workers in the school and having counselors in the school. And because of the training and background of social workers and the scope of the work that they can provide, that counselors might not be able to provide. So at some point, it might be interesting to have that kind of discussion as well. There was some very strong opinions about the need to have social workers and counselors to address the social emotional needs of kids. So if you're looking for Plexiam, it was an interesting conversation. I just thought I would point that
We have
out.
some social workers on our CASB board, just saying, so.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments, board members? All right, hearing none, thank you all. We'll move next to the information item on our agenda, which is an update from the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and staff. Rob Price approaching the podium.
It is a pleasure to introduce Rob Price, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Operational Services. And he has been a pleasure to work with. He had big shoes to fill, and I think he's overflowing the shoes.
Wow.
So, Rob, you're on.
You've given me a big head tonight. Well, good evening. I'm very pleased to introduce our two chairs with our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So Mike McLaughlin is our chair, and Kara Carmichael is our co-chair. So they will present tonight on CBOC, which is our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having us. So I'm Mike McLaughlin. I'm a parent of 2 daughters. My wife and I live in Netherland, and a daughter in Netherland Elementary and a daughter in Netherland Middle High School. So I'm invested in this process, and I have served on the committee since its inception. You last received a update around the committee's work in April 2017. The committee last met on May 17th and August 16th, since that last update that we provided to you. On our May meeting, we welcomed 5 new members, and I was nominated and approved in the role of committee chairperson of that meeting, and Kara Carmichael was nominated and approved at our August meeting to serve as vice chair, and thankfully she accepted. The committee continues to enjoy great participation from the community, so we're appreciative of the support, and we have, I would say, even a renewed sense of enthusiasm, especially as we've really caught wind in the progress of the bond program. We had an opportunity at our August meeting to tour the Boulder High School, and particularly the bond improvements that have happened there. And it's interesting, your conversation earlier today, I think, was in line. The commitment to innovation was quite evident, particularly in the spaces created for collaboration, and we got to see during our tour. In specific, Boulder High School chose to use its innovation funds to create a curiosity center, and by remodeling the library. And it also combines the cafeteria, and it's really created a heart of the school. That was pretty evident on our tour, and in fact, I think there's a great deal of enthusiasm within the school community, and some hope, I think, and some foresight that the greater community, the greater Boulder community, is going to be able to use that space as well. So that was pretty interesting in seeing the bond funds at work. A large number of CBOC members toured the new schools on the bus tour prior to the first day, and that was well received. If I may, I'd like to give you some financial highlights and give you an update on how we're doing there. So each meeting, our group reviews the financial reports, staff presents a forecast, and also projected recommendations for bond premium fund usage, if that's appropriate. As of August 31st, we have expended $227,865,031. Our contracted commitments include $325,267,867. The staff will be providing those slides for you, I think, subsequent to the meeting. Commitments for projects in construction total $259,356,221. And our commitments for projects in design include $10,252,867. Of the original bond premium funds, $29,352,084 have been allocated to projects, and $24,451,950 of bond premium funds have been allocated to the inflation for future projects. That was a great deal of discussion had on that. The financial reports are posted on the financial page of the bond program website. CBOC action items, as I already mentioned and as you've heard, officers were elected in May. I'd like to also detail the process that we have for the review of financial items that are presented before the committee to staff. Staff provides an update at each meeting of projected bond premium expenditures. Prior to the meeting at which action will be taken, the staff provides us background information and rationale for their recommendations. The committee may submit questions regarding the action items to the staff prior to the meeting, and at the meeting, staff presents the recommendation and all relevant background and financial information, as well as answers to the committee's questions for discussion. The committee then takes that under advisement and takes action to support or deny the recommendation, sometimes asking for additional information, which will then be put off into the next committee meeting. We feel the process is working as designed, and it actually has enhanced our ability to provide oversight to the bond program. Thank you. Kara, would you care to add anything?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, board members? No questions?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Jenny?
So, I think you've answered this one, but do you feel as a committee like you're getting the information from staff that you need to have to practice oversight?
It's a great question, and yes, I think we have gotten better as the bond program has progressed. I think our committee members have gotten a bit more insightful in terms of how the bond program is working, so I think that's been helpful. It's been a learning exercise. There's certainly been very vigorous debate, particularly around the process, and I think Rob and staff have done a great job at educating us, for instance, in the estimating process as that occurred early on as the bond was prepared, and how that has progressed and how we've gotten refinement around those estimates. So yeah, I think the committee feels pretty solid that the information we're getting from staff is complete, comprehensive, and if we do require information, that's certainly been forthcoming.
Okay, well, thank you, that's good to hear. And then this is just sort of a general, I assume it's true, but if I were to ask you as a member of the Oversight Committee, are we as a district doing the things we promised to do, we promised our public we would do at the bond? Would your answer be yes, pretty much, or?
Absolutely, very, very, very strong yes. And I think one of the things that we had, once again, vigorous debate on at our August meeting was around how well we're doing in terms of plan and actuals, and how we're getting there. So testament to Rob and the staff and the entire organization that's supporting those efforts. But I think the financial performance against what the master plan had envisioned and how we're executing against that is being done extremely well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jenny. Tina, then Tom.
Yeah, do we feel at this point in time, and I think this has been answered before, but I can't remember, that we're going to have excess money when we complete these projects? Are we right to the line? I noticed the premium had been allocated for inflation, but it doesn't seem like it's been specifically allocated. So can you speak to that a little bit if you're able?
Certainly. So I think that was a two-part question. I think I can readily answer the second part of the question. The first part of the question I'm going to defer to Rob and staff. The second part of the question specifically was the inflation allocation that we did on the most recent bond premium. So that those bond premium funds have been allocated to inflation, or essentially an inflation reserve. They will be assigned to a project once full value engineering has been completed on a particular project, if they feel they're going to run up against cost constraints. And I'll defer the first one. Rob?
Yeah, let me address the first one. So last summer, we completed 8 projects, and of those 8, we returned about 1.2 million in savings. So that savings then gets rolled up into the inflation. So we're holding that for those projects that haven't reached the guaranteed maximum price. Now, the other 10 projects that are wrapping up this summer, we don't have final numbers, but I do expect savings from those 10 also. I just don't have that specific amount just yet.
So are we at a point where, like, I know when High Peaks and BCSAS did their planning,
Right,
they were over budget.
that's right.
But we're not at a point where we can give them what they wanted. Is that?
High Peaks, the reason that that project was delayed is we got a guaranteed maximum price at the 11th hour. We had a contractor walk in, tell us they needed approval on their guaranteed maximum price by 5 o'clock. And the only way we could reach that GMP was to cut significant scope, cut the roofing completely out, cuts the mechanical system completely out. So I didn't feel like we were getting good value as a district. So that's why we didn't have time to cancel that contract, hire another general contractor. So that I felt more comfortable canceling the contract, delaying the project to make sure we got that value and we met that scope.
Okay, and then,
Is that
yeah, and then if the scope for University Hill increases,
right?
where would that money come from at this point in time?
That is still what we're vetting out, and I do not have an answer
Okay.
for that. That would have to be a real estate transaction or something else, and we don't know yet. So we have
Don't
not
have that
taken.
kind of money to fill in gaps at this
We
point
do
in
not,
time.
and we have not. We've given a general update to Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, but we have not asked them to take action on that project. Now, we did tell them in October we'll bring that back for discussion. So, anything else?
Yeah, I have a question for Sept. So thanks for coming and giving us a report. I appreciate your work and volunteering for the whole committee if you'll pass that along. At a previous report that Sept gave to the board by your predecessor, there was some concern over scope growth and overruns that they were uncomfortable with at the time. And obviously, there's going to be unforeseen things that happen all the time and things of that nature. But I've wondered, since that meeting, has the committee discussed this and at what level they would feel that they would need to come to the board? Because I would certainly encourage you guys to come to the board at any time you feel uncomfortable with where we are.
Thank you for your question, Tom. And yes, there is, I think, significant conversation held, particularly when the staff and the process also has been getting, I think, even more timely. We're getting a little bit more long-term vision about, hey, this is going to be something we're going to need to consider down the road. For instance, Uni Hills is a great example. We've been hearing about that and about the ongoing discussions with the university and what have you for quite some time. So we've gotten some foreshadowing. So I think that process is working well. In the conversations around scope changes, and particularly unforeseen sorts of issues, one thing I will mention, I know Rob's going to talk about, I think, in his presentation, is construction costs are increasing. There's great demand, and there's great, I think, pressure put on what it takes us in order to be able to fulfill that master plan vision. The committee debates very diligently the options that are put in front of us, and particularly the value engineering steps that the staff is going through to understand how do we meet plan scope and still stay within the budget constraints. When the committee, and we did reach this point, by the way, I think at Centaurus and some of the conversations we had there, it was considered to actually bring that back to the Board of Education. So I think the committee in general feels very comfortable in doing that, and were we to feel that we're in a position where it's overstepping or pushing our boundaries, I think you'll see us come back for advice and or guidance.
Other questions, board members?
Well, Kara Carmichael, the co-chair, and I too have been on the committee since the inception and have two kids, one in kindergarten and one in second grade. And I would just echo what Mike said. I think, I work in the architecture and construction industry, and the volatility that we've seen since the bond was issued has, it's been all over the map. And I think staff has done a really great job in containing that volatility and being very transparent and forthcoming with us. So I have a high degree of confidence in their ability to bring projects in budget.
Appreciate that. Other comments, questions, board members? Hearing none. Rob, always appreciate your work. And Kara and Mike, thank you, and please extend our thanks to CBOC for their dedication.
I'm going to pull up our next presentation here real quick. So bond was passed in November of 2014. We're almost 3 years into the bond. As we have reported last time, we have so far completed 18 projects of the 63. We have another 20 projects in design or construction. So, and then looking forward in 2018, we'll have 17 projects under construction. So far we have completed work in every community and for all students at all grade levels. As Mike reported, expenditures to date, $227.8 million as of August 31st, 35.4% complete. So we're in the final stages of the 4 major construction projects. Those were the new schools. Those billings have not caught up, so these numbers really reflect where we were at the end of June, our fiscal year end. So we expect this will increase dramatically over the next month when the billings catch up to the accounting. So I think everyone has asked tonight, and this is the biggest question, the million-dollar question I get on a daily basis: do we have enough funds to complete what was promised to the voters? And in April of this year, CBOC supported our request to reallocate $24 million from bond premium to inflation. That inflation has not been given to each individual project. However, it is set aside as a percentage of each individual project. So we give it on an as-needed basis to ensure that we meet scope. So we really relied on some outside sources to tell us where the economy is going and what the construction market is doing. So I can sit here today and confidently say, yes, we can meet scope. It's all dependent on where the economy goes, but right now, for what we know, where we believe it is headed with all the school bonds that passed this past November, we're confident we'll meet scope as we move forward. Financial information, as Mike presented, all of this can be found on our bond website. If you ever have specific questions, please let me know, but everything that we distribute to CBOC is located here. New schools, as most of you are familiar, we did open up all 4 new schools on time. So very satisfying finally to see students and staff in these new spaces, fully enjoying the abundance of natural light. That is probably the key of what I'm hearing from all students and staff. Comfortable furniture, variety, and flexible learning spaces. Families and community members have turned out with great enthusiasm at the ribbon cutting so far. And then as you mentioned, we have another ribbon cutting on Thursday at 6 p.m. at Douglas Elementary School. So renovation projects, this is the majority of the bond. And as we would like, we would love to rebuild all of our schools in Boulder Valley, but we know that's not realistic. So what can we do to improve? So this summer we completed 10 renovation projects. These types of projects really represent what was in the master plan. Much of this work takes place where we can't see it. It's above ceilings, on the roof, et cetera. So includes roof repairs, door and window replacements, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning improvements, new carpet, lighting and ceiling tiles, which go a long way to make the classrooms feel more inviting. So in addition, we're creating additional space to expand early childhood learning and to meet other programmatic needs. We're getting rid of modulars on our sites such as Aspen Creek and El Dorado. And then we're constructing a new gymnasium out at Manhattan Middle School. That was one of the projects that you talked about, Tom. So again, this renovation work creates the opportunity to make progress towards district goals related to energy efficiency as well as improving indoor air quality, enhancing security. As you can see in these photos, carpet replacement in the left-hand photo, upper right is the new rooftop units at Birch Elementary, new windows at Louisville, and then a new roof at Broomfield High. So innovation projects, I gotta admit, this is where the most excitement is. This is where teachers and staff and students are focused on. So these projects are driven by BVSD's innovation guiding principles, led by Dave Egan and Kiffany Lightshock. We're pushing the district-wide shift to our approach to instruction. With these innovation funds, schools get the opportunity to think creatively about how the learning environment can support instruction. So again, that's the majority of the excitement. Types of projects that we're seeing on the innovation side: library renovations, furniture makeovers, innovation spaces, such as what we talked about at Boulder High School. We renovated the cafeteria and the library, really creating heart of that facility. Energy efficiency. As you know, we set 2 major goals. By 2019, we wanted to reduce energy by 20%, and by 2050, reduce our EUI to 30, which would make us net zero capable. So we're on target. Right now, we're seeing a 62% average improvement across all 18 projects. That's significant. So we're well on our way to meet our 20% goal. We've received we expect Excel energy rebates of nearly $400,000, and then our predicted utility savings on just the 6 projects that were modeled were $170,000. We expect that number to grow considerably. This is just a chart to give you another idea of where we're seeing that 62% energy savings across the district. Again, you got to remember, so far, we've added air conditioning to 6 buildings, and we're still improving on our EUI. That's how we're measuring that energy usage intensity. Security enhancements are included in the scope for every school. The overall objectives are to monitor and control visitor access. So we're adding access control, exterior cameras, secure vestibules, et cetera. As you can see in this photo, we're also doing digital radios, AI phone for visitor access, and then in the lower bottom, that is at Douglas Elementary, and that's the secure vestibule. So as you can see, regular updates can be found on the website. I gotta say, we're extremely grateful for the taxpayers. That's been noted several times at the ribbon cuttings, but we wouldn't be here today without them, so thanks to them.
Thanks, Rob. Questions, board members? Kathy?
So you said we could expect new numbers when, in October?
We will, yes, at the October CBONC meeting, we'll present those numbers, and then we'll put them automatically on the website. Yep.
And so could we get an update maybe in November or December?
Our next
After
update to the board is planned for December.
Okay.
But we can move that up if you'd like.
If you see anything when the numbers come in, you can let us
Okay,
know, but otherwise, I
definitely.
think we can stick to that.
Yep.
Okay.
Jenny?
So, first of all, I'd like to say that I know that the early childhood improvements are really appreciated. Superior up until now has not had an early childhood program. I think it's our only community without an early childhood program because there's just been no space for it. And I think there's a demand for it there. And so I know they're really excited to get something going now that they've got the
Right.
space. And then I'd like to thank all the, you know, the buildings that are new are really exciting and beautiful, but we've got a lot of wonderful stuff going on at our buildings that aren't brand new, and I think we need to remember that sometime, that there's just as much innovation and excitement at some of those buildings, and in fact, maybe even better. I know that Broomfield Heights, the principal at Broomfield Heights Middle School told me, last week or the week before, that it was kind of fun to be a building that was their second year in, and they didn't have to they weren't moving in, and it was really, they were able to now take advantage of things, and they weren't under the same kind of pressure that they had been. So kudos to all those buildings out there that are, and teachers that are doing that great innovation work without the advantage of a totally new building. And then I wonder, I know we've done some security with exterior cameras. I wonder if there are any conversations going on about interior cameras in our high school?
I'll ask Cindy to address that.
I thought you might.
Oh, thank you, Assistant Superintendent for Operational Services. We've had discussions. I come from a place where all of our high schools had cameras everywhere. And as I've talked with the staff about that, they believe that at one point the board, I don't know if it was this board or a previous board, was very opposed to cameras within schools. I came from a system where they could just watch the building, watch kids in the hallway, watch what was going on. But that would have to be a board decision.
But I guess my question would be, has staff talked about it, and is there any conversation about coming forward with a recommendation? It's something I hear about from my
There
community
hasn't
a
been
lot.
yet, because generally when we have talked about it, the staff has said the board has been opposed, and we didn't have an interest in bringing something to you that you'd already said that you were opposed to. If you want us to develop that, I think operations would be happy to develop that, so you could look at what the possibilities would be. And I think you've probably done some work previously.
We have some preliminary numbers. I think it would have to be a future bond to add interior cameras. We're talking
that's good to know.
the magnitude of $4 to $5 million to add cameras.
Well, that's really good information to have.
Yeah.
It's something I hear about a lot, and I know that the board that was opposed to that was pre-Columbine, I think.
Okay.
So the
And-
climate may have, and I would think it'd be a community-wide conversation. I'm not weighing in one way or another. I just know that there's some discussion out there, and it may be that the community, that the climate has changed enough that it's time to revisit that.
And if it's something we wanted to look at, we could look at it at the high school level and then phase it in throughout the
Well,
district.
and I'm
if that's what
thinking
we wanna
that
do.
that's where I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I haven't really heard that elementary
Right.
schools feel a great need for that, but I have heard from some high schools that they do.
Most of our surrounding districts are doing it. We're one of very few that don't have interior cameras right now,
At the high school level?
at all levels.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, Kathy?
Is that 4 or 5 million for high school, or is that
That's
district-wide?
district-wide.
So it would be less than that if we wanted to
Considerably
look at the high
less, yeah.
schools?
Yep.
I just say, I think it's time for a conversation like Jenny had. I've gone to the principal meetings at Fairview for the last year, and that is one of the hot topics at every single principal's meeting from the community. So I think it's time to open up that conversation.
I agree. I think it is a conversation the board should have. I think it's a conversation that staff should have. We haven't had it seriously because the assumption was the board was not there. But we would welcome a board conversation on whether we should be looking at our high schools. And I think our high school principals would be supportive.
Yep.
Well, Tom?
Yeah, I can say for myself, I don't know that this board is against cameras. I do believe we have a policy on video surveillance, so don't we, Melissa, that we would have to bring out and talk about. And again, I think Jenny's correct, that happened long before any of us got on the board and long before Columbine. And I do believe we need to revisit that, and it's probably a good item to put on the agenda, say.
Okay. Let me just do a quick check. Shelley, go ahead. And let me know how you feel about having a security camera discussion.
Rob, thank you. You guys are doing a great job, and you've helped create this seamless transition when it seemed like we couldn't do without Don Orr, and I still miss him.
Yes.
But you have really stepped in and taken over this huge, complex project and are handling it so well. And I really appreciate your last comment about the taxpayers. Sometimes it's easy to forget where all this money's coming from. And so I like to try and remember every day when I look at a school that, who we need to thank. So thanks for remembering that. Yeah.
And do you have an opinion on, should we have a discussion on security cameras? Since we're
I
talking
think
about-
that whole topic is debatable, and I would not mind it coming before the board to have that discussion at all. There are, I think to go into that thinking that there are only pros and no cons isn't quite, accurate. So I would like to discuss both.
Sure.
Yeah.
Richard?
I too would welcome the discussion on the security cameras inside the buildings.
Okay, so Dr. Stevenson, I think you have your answer. The board is at least interested in a discussion with some options, some costs, and then we'll find a place on the calendar to talk about it. Other questions or comments for Rob? Hearing none, thanks again, Rob, for everything. We appreciate it. Look forward to your next update. Oh, I did have a quick question. I'm assuming that the schools that aren't on your slide about projects in progress, they're coming later?
They're coming later,
Yeah,
so
okay.
we have those phased through 2021.
Okay,
So that's what the schedule look ahead
great.
looks like. Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is action items consent grouping, including 7.1 personnel items, 7.2 approval of minutes, August 29th, 2017 special meeting, 7.3 approval of minutes, September 12th, 2017 special meeting, 7.4 approval of minutes, September 12th, 2017 regular meeting, 7.5 approval of minutes, September 19th, 2017 special meeting. We got 7.6, close out to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond-funded improvement work at the Summit Middle School. 7.7, grant Arapahoe campus teen parenting regional collaboration for human services funding. And 7.8, grant Boulder High School Adelante a la Universidad regional collaboration for human services funding, city and county of Boulder. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Hearing none, need a motion to approve. Motion from Kathy, second from Tina. Any questions or comments on any items on consent grouping? Hearing none, Laura, could you please call the vote on the motion to approve the consent grouping?
Belval. Yes. Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia. Yes. Gebhardt. Yes. Marquis. Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, moving now to action items. We did have board policy BG, school board policy process. We had that on consent, but as Jenny alertly pointed out, there was something in the policy that required an additional discussion point for this. So it's pulled out as a separate action item, the board policy BG, the school board policy process that we discussed at our last meeting. I need a motion. Motion from Tina, second. Second from Kathy. Is there discussion of this policy? Any questions or comments? Jenny?
So this policy, the big change in the policy, as I believe Tina can correct me, is that it requires that the board be notified 30 days in advance of changes to regulations, and I think that's a good change, so I'm in favor of that. I mean, sometimes we're the last to know about these things, and that could kind of catch us off guard.
Thanks, Jenny. Other comments? Hearing none, Laura, could you please call the vote on the motion to approve this updated board policy?
Belval.
Yes.
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia. Gebhardt. Marquis. Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thanks, board members. Moving to our study items, the first of which is the CASB Fall Delegate Assembly. It's coming up in October 13th through the 14th, and as usual, there is a packet of proposed resolutions. I would like to yield the floor to our CASB representatives. You're asking us, I believe, to sign off on the proposed resolutions or modify them, see if we want to present any ourselves.
So I don't think we're supportive of all. I think unless anybody else is interested, I think Kathy has expressed an interest in being our delegate to the assembly. And I don't know that all of the resolutions that are proposed, I should be clear, the standing resolutions are things that CASB generally is likely to approve and we're likely to support. And then there are resolutions that are proposed by various school boards. And it's not necessarily that the CASB Legislative Resolutions Committee or the CASB Board of Directors thinks they're all a good idea. They're just all forwarded for discussion by the delegate assembly. And my recommendation would be that Kathy's judgment is pretty good. So rather than going through these one by one, if there's anything that particularly stands out as something we should support or oppose, please point that out. I will say the one thing that the Legislative Resolutions Committee does recommend is Resolution 24, which urges the Colorado Association of School Boards, the Colorado Governor, the General Assembly, the Para Board of Trustees to undertake all necessary steps to ensure that Para remains sustainable and an effective vehicle to provide retirement benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And so that one, the Legislative Resolutions Committee supports, and I think, we should too, but as for the other ones, I would think that if there's nothing that people have to say particularly, we can trust Kathy to represent us, I believe.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other questions or comments, board members? Tina?
Yeah, I'm thankful, Kathy, that you'll go down and be the delegate. I did that once. It's a long day. I did have a couple of comments on the standing resolution SR2, which is on page 10, if you're scrolling through. It says that the control of instruction, including efforts to restructure and fund public education, et cetera, as determined by the locally elected school board. I think that sentence, if it comes up, if there's a way to I think I know what they're trying to say, but it's pretty confusing, and obviously it might just be where the commas are in that sentence. It's not, they have put so many different motive or themes in that sentence, and I'm not really sure what's to be determined by the locally elected school board in this case. So if there's a way to clarify that, it just doesn't have a lot of meaning to me. So local governance, I think, is just clear that we make our own decisions related to instruction and how we disperse our own finances. So that would be a comment on that. The other one is I really oppose legislation or resolutions that further give us more mandates. So Summit's County Board of Education put forth a resolution that says that CASB should encourage school boards to do more things related to the whole child. So I really don't like the resolutions that give us more tasks, especially when they don't come with funding tied to it. So I would like to, I would love it if we could oppose anything that creates more restrictions. The other. That's 18. Yeah, and there are just a couple like that, Shelley, that are just saying, it's kind of, they're saying that they, they want something to happen, and it's a great idea. We are doing more social emotional, but I don't think I need the General Assembly to tell us to do that. The other piece is just making sure when we support resolutions that ask for more funding, that there's not an option to shift funding. So I think it's really important to say we're only looking for incremental funding, not for you to give us more direction on how to use our funding that we already have a lot of direction on. And sometimes that's not clear. So, sometimes from, just about the priorities, we're looking for more funding, and how we spend it should be really a decision of our local board, not of the General Assembly. And then my last, there is one legislative thing. I'm sorry, I'm going on a little long about this. There's the number one, the legislative session resolution, which is on page, it's 3, but in the new numbering, my thing isn't numbering. Okay, yeah, by Pooter. 12. It says, we support actively for the adoption of policies and legislation to provide the General Assembly with greater flexibility in setting the state budget. I'm not crazy about that wording, and I am okay with more funding for education. In fact, I'm very in favor of it. But I'm not really, I don't know I don't know what role the General Assembly should have, and I think we want to just be careful on what kind of power the resolutions give. Now, all that being said, whether any of this makes a difference, I don't know. But those would be my comments about the resolutions in here. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Tina. Other comments? Shelley?
So, on 24, Kathy,
Resolution 24, page 24.
Resolution 24, page 21. Yeah, the para one. That just seems like what does it have to do with us? It's in a direction to the Colorado, the governor and the General Assembly, and there seems to be nothing to do with the school board in that resolution, and I'm just wondering how that is relevant to us. I understand the concept of what they're trying to do, and I agree with it, but why is it in here as part of a school board?
I think only, I don't know, because I wasn't, I mean, maybe Jenny can address that, but I think it's so that they don't add to the burden for school boards in, I mean, the last sentence, right? And ensure the financial burden placed on para-employers does not become a barrier to hiring employees. That's the only, that would be my
Okay, that's,
suggestion. I agree,
Feels
it's
like a
not the
stretch.
best worded.
Right.
and-
yeah,
So we're a para employer.
I understand
So
that.
this is a lobbying platform. So to the extent there's legislation involved to stabilize legislation or action, we support action that stabilizes para and keeps it in order. I think there are also and the other thing that might happen, that happens sometimes, that I will say, there's some concern about is, for example, in rural Colorado, where rural school districts are paying para benefits for what are essentially minimum wage jobs, that there's some feeling, I don't know that there's any legislation out there to address this, but occasionally, sometimes it's a barrier to hire, the para is a barrier to allowing school districts to offer more money to employees, so that the school districts are not competitive with school districts, with private employers that may be paying Social Security benefits instead of para benefits. The para benefits are much more expensive. And so it may make several dollars an hour difference in what a school district is able to offer its bus drivers and paraprofessionals and cafeteria workers and maintenance workers, and that makes it very difficult for some school districts to hire employees. And so there's been some conversation. I'm not aware of anything that's out there to deal with that, but there might be legislation proposed, and it would give guidance to the lobbyists about that.
The one thing is the para board just came out with the initial set of recommendations to increase contributions and from both the taxpayer and so I think, I don't know if we need a resolution. It has to happen anyway, but if it's fine to,
just wasn't clear on why it was coming to school boards, but.
So it's just an instruction to our lobbyists to support anything that would stabilize para.
And then on number 18, to the one you brought up, Tina, I can't,
It's the whole child one.
the whole child one, I can't find it now.
26. Page 26, yeah.
It's page 17 in the booklet.
17,
If you got it.
Yes.
yeah, got it. Yeah, so the issue I have with that language is that whole child means so many different things to so many different people. Like, when I first heard the term, it was specifically meant whole child as in make sure they get art and music and PE along with their academics. That was the definition of whole child. And then it extended to all sorts of other things. So I just think that language is like just not specific enough at all for that.
I agree, and I think that the requirements to educate the whole child requires thoughtful legislation. I'm not sure that it does. I like Tina's point, which is you leave it to the local district. That seems to
Yeah.
me to be infringing on local control.
Yeah. But the one that I am really a fan of, that I hope you will go in there with all your guns saying this is what we want, is number 2.
So can I ask on 18, do you want me to try to amend that?
I think we,
Or
I
get
would,
rid of-
yeah, I
Or
would,
just oppose it?
yeah.
And just say it's our board's position that this is the control of local districts and we don't really need a resolution directing the legislature.
Well, we got to go around on that.
And we don't even know, we're not agreed on what these terms even mean in this resolution, so.
So I have a comment on that. You might want to amend it because I'm looking at the rationale, and the rationale has to do with providing mental health supports for our students.
Right.
Which I think doesn't have anything to do, I mean, so I think that it's clearly not the intent of this resolution to deal with art or music. It's to provide appropriate mental health supports for our students. And I think it also may be, I mean, it may be something that you need to see how the conversation goes at the delegate assembly, because I think it's related to the Claire Davis Act and the requirements that we, the additional requirements on school districts to provide sort of, that are buried in the, I mean, that's my guess, is that it's related to the requirements that school districts are now under as a result of the Claire Davis Act to provide mental health support. So you may not like this, but I think, it looks to me like from the rationale, that's what it's.
But the rationale to me
aimed at.
doesn't track with the language.
No.
Okay, let me go around the, Tom, thoughts on that one? I think the proposal is to oppose that.
Yeah,
Okay,
good with that.
Richard?
I don't know. I just go back to think about the Parent Engagement Network, PEN, and why they were established here in Boulder Valley School District. And I think part of the reason why they were established is because there was relatively a high suicide rate here in Boulder Valley schools. And at least that's my understanding. And if this particular resolution does anything to slow that down, if it hasn't slowed down, and it does encourage school boards to continue expanding social emotional health supports, I don't see anything wrong with it, frankly.
I just wish all that part that you just said was in the actual resolution instead of what's in the actual resolution, which is that very nebulous language.
What if, Sam?
Yeah.
What if we just took out the second sentence?
That would help.
I'd be okay with that.
Supported the first sentence as our amendment, because I think then the rationale tracks, but otherwise that second sentence makes me a little nervous.
Here's my thing, though, is it says it encourages Colorado school boards. So I don't need encouragement today. What I need is more money, and that's not, like, that's the phrasing I don't like. I don't need general thoughts of well-being. It's, you know, if we can say CASB encourages legislators to give more money, which might be applied toward mental health, I'm all for it.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with striking it, and
Okay.
so I think what I'll say is that, well, you need to finish going around the board, then I'll figure out what.
Well, I think, let's see, Tom, proposal was to strike that last sentence in proposal 18. Strike the whole thing. And replace it with what, Kathy? What's your summary of the?
I don't have a replacement. I was just
Okay.
gonna suggest what Tina did, which is we don't support it because we believe that boards are already doing this and that we actually think the state should be stepping up and providing us additional resources to meet the needs of the kids.
You okay with that, Tom? Richard? Shelley? Nods? Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
Great.
With clarifying wording, I think that's what their intent is, so, yeah, I think.
Okay.
And Shelley, I'm fine with giving wholehearted support to two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that was something that was not intended, I think, to happen in that original legislation. I think that having us, school boards allowed to meet in executive session to determine our bargaining strategy is only fair, given that that happens with the Education Association. So I fully support that one.
Anybody not support number 2? Yeah, go ahead.
So is there a reason why we don't meet in any kind of session right now? Because I was only on the board when that was enacted. So there was never a time when we met in executive session.
Right, because this law got passed before you probably came on the
Right.
board. I never did either, and I've been on the board for 6 years. so-
Okay. Because does it have to be executive? I mean, is there any, what kept us from meeting in general in a work session to determine positions?
Because of this rule that we're not allowed to get together and discuss bargaining strategy.
So then my question is, does it have to be executive session, or could it just
No.
be in any session?
It could be. I mean, I think the thought is that you might want to get together in executive session to discuss your strategy,
Okay.
just like the city council meets to discuss the muni strategy.
Right.
You know, it's the same kind of concept, that
Okay.
you might not want that out there, but
But we could choose to do
you
it
could
publicly.
choose to do it
Okay.
publicly, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the law basically said you had to conduct all negotiations in public. And which I was fine with. I always wanted to do that, but I wanted to talk about what the issues were with the members of the school board. Prior to the law, we did have exec session meetings talking about that when Chris King was superintendent. Yeah. After Chris King left, we didn't have any of those, and then this law was passed, and then we didn't have no public meetings either. You know, which I was fine having a public meeting, but we just need to talk about it before we start going into negotiations. So I wholeheartedly support this.
Okay. Any other comments? Jenny?
So I'd like to ask Kathy if she'd like to address BEST and what her thoughts are about any resolutions having to do with BEST. I can't find it in here now. Okay.
I wholeheartedly support increased financing to BEST.
Okay, I think that's fair. Okay.
Can I just make a comment that it needs to be incremental? So I don't think we should be shifting to
We're not
best. Okay.
shifting. But, okay.
It's 22, the marijuana excise tax.
We
Are
so
you
far are
thinking-
the only district in the state that's taken advantage of the operational mill. And I think if we could use some of the best funds to support rural districts to provide a match so that they could build roofs and replace boilers with shorter-term financing options, that's a big ask. The most important ask is that there's extra excise tax dollars coming in that BEST didn't get to use. And so we lost $60 million last year that could have gone to cash grants. And so that's the point of the
Mm-hmm.
resolution.
Any other comments on that? All right.
I just want to respond to Tina on two. I think it is very poorly written, especially the second part, including efforts to restructure and fund public education is determined by the locally elected school board. That makes no sense to me. So I might raise that. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, the rest of it kind of does, but that part, I don't even understand what that means.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, it is very weird, so.
Well, with those comments, Kathy, you feel comfortable bringing the perspective?
I appreciate the trust of the board, and I will do my best to honor that. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, board members. Good discussion. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is a study of the draft of a school district attorney policy. Oh, yes.
The Friday meeting before the delegate assembly is an open CASB meeting, and they will have most of the, not delegates, what do I want to say?
Governor, the candidates for governor.
Candidates for governor on both sides coming for question and answer, and then a meet and greet after. So I just wanted to let everyone know that's not just for delegates, that's for all CASB members.
Okay.
So
Thank you. There's a good Friday agenda.
it's Friday, whatever that Friday is before the delegate assembly. That's what that, last year it was an equity conference, which was really unclear who was even supposed to go to it, but this is definitely open for all CASB.
Okay, looks like
And
Friday
so-
the 13th of
And they-
October?
Yeah, and they have they are expecting a pretty good turnout of candidates on both sides. So I just wanted to let the board know that that was open and
Great,
to
thank you.
invite everyone.
Just as a thing, the delegate conference is always open to all school board members, and Friday has always got an agenda that's designed for general interest. And then anybody's welcome to attend the delegate conference. We can just have one vote. But Kathy coached me last year, so.
All right, thanks. Next study item, 9.2, draft of school district attorney policy, which you have before you in board docs. Dr. Stevenson or Melissa Barber, any setup or presentation?
Yes, we welcome Melissa Barber to talk about this policy draft, and we have already, Tom has already let us know he has concerns about one part of it, so Melissa.
So the board, some of you might remember that we did have an attorney policy
on the books that was deleted in 2009. And that was when the board, working with Ken Roberge and Jim Reed, went through the whole B section. And that policy was pulled. We were trying to align with what was in CASB, the model policies at that time. The policy was originally went into place in 1978, it's almost 40 years ago, and there was no substitute policy with the CASB model policies. And it didn't really reflect at that point kind of the current practice of having in-house counsel, out-house general counsel, and then other attorney work for specialized services. So the board asked that we staff put together a new attorney policy, and this is what I've put together. Again, there's no CASB model, and I did find some different policies in some other school districts and kind of put together things that I thought reflected our current practice. So that's essentially what is in this document.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions or comments? Members? Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom.
So one of the things that, prompted some concern with this was, some of the things that happened in the spring, and I and a number of other, I'm sure, realize that it would be very useful for the board itself to have some independent counsel that was separate from the school district council, particularly in matters where the school board may be having issues with current administration. So what I wanted to see was not only a documentation of current practices, which, we have, of course, in-house attorney and an outside counsel that their attorney works with, and that's totally fine and necessary, but also a provision so that this board could have independent representation and independent advice when things get, shall we say, complicated. So that was one of my main reasons for trying to move forward a policy on actually school board attorney. But I see the need to have an overall policy on our school attorneys. But what I want to see in this is the ability of the board itself to retain counsel and get advice on counsel as the board would need, independently from any counsel that would serve the school district at large.
Thanks, Tom.
Can I ask, the last sentence in paragraph 2, I might not be reading it correctly, but I thought that's what that sentence said, Tom, what you just said. But maybe I'm missing something.
Well, so the sentence is, the board reserves the right to obtain independent legal counsel should occasion arise requiring such legal services. Tom, does that address your?
No, I'd like to see it a little stronger than that. Of course, we could do that anytime we want to. I would like to see an ongoing relationship that not when we want to, but that we do have a presence on retainer with a firm that we work with on a continuing basis as the need arises. And that's not every exec session meeting or everything that comes up, but I think it is to the school district and the board's advantage to be able to get legal opinions from an outside firm that is not involved in school district affairs.
And if I could make one comment, a lawyer that represents the school district represents the school district. The board is part of the school district entity, just as an ethical matter in terms of any lawyer that's going to represent. They're not going to represent you all as a board because it's the school district that the attorney owes the duty to.
And that's my point.
Let me go Kathy, then Shelley.
I think it's really dangerous, Tom, to see us as independent from the school district. And to think that we need independent counsel on retainer, I think is a very dangerous road to go down.
And Shelley?
I thought we were technically two separate legal entities. That was my understanding, the school board and the school district. So am I wrong about that?
You are, right. The board is not a separate legal entity. It's the school district is the legal entity. And it acts through your actions.
I think I'm going to go back and look at that. I hear what you're saying, but that is not what I think I read when I was looking into this. I think almost, well, certainly over a year ago, I sent a draft policy. I don't know if you remember, on this very thing. I also did what you did and searched other districts to see the policies they had. And I sent one, and in the course of doing that, I read up on it, and I believe that what I learned was that we are two separate legal entities, and that is why some school districts have separate representation, just because of that. So there can be times where the board's interests could be different than the superintendent's interests, and that's why it's set up that way. But let me just make sure of that, and I'll send you anything I can find on that. But that was the purpose of trying to have a policy like this. Yeah.
Tina, then Kathy?
Yeah, I didn't anticipate the question about getting a separate lawyer for the school board on retainer, so I don't want to, I'll need to investigate that myself, I think, because I'm a little worried about the budgetary implications, and I felt like we were able to get separate representation when we needed it in the spring, so I didn't feel that I was in any way constrained in what we needed to do, and I want to hear what people say, but I wasn't anticipating the legal entity conversation.
Okay. Yeah, retainer, what my interest is that this board be able to reach out rapidly to an independent firm. And there was a little bit of struggle this time around, and a lot of exec sessions, and so I would like to be able to have that as a resource to the board as necessary.
Well, maybe there's a way to add language that strengthens that sentence to accommodate quick access to independent counsel, should that become necessary.
Yeah, I think we can come up with something that would also outline how we might do that. Obviously, there's got to be constraints. We don't want to be spending money by every board member calling an attorney. So I think there needs to be some thought around that, right? But I do think that it's a prudent thing to do that for our public to understand that, that we want to make sure that there's no even an appearance of a conflict of interest in our operations. I'm not saying there is. I'm saying I just don't even want an appearance. So having someone that doesn't do, work for the school district and get paid by the superintendent is a good thing to have, in my opinion.
Okay, Kathy?
The attorneys don't get paid by the superintendent, Tom. They get paid through a process that we set out here by the district that we approve, so that statement wasn't exactly accurate.
Yeah, I apologize. The superintendent has authority up to $50,000 to pay them, and he can and does. But it comes from school district funds, and the superintendent is the manager of the general fund. So the superintendent can spend money up to $50,000 without board approval, and that happens. So I just want to make sure that we not crossing our wires here.
I just will reiterate that I have very strong reservations about putting us at odds with the interest of the district, except in extraordinary circumstances like we saw in the spring, and I didn't feel constrained at all in finding independent counsel, hiring them, and working with them. I don't think it slowed anything down.
Okay, other comments? Shelley? Oh, Jenny?
So I've got two comments. First of all, I share Kathy's concerns about holding ourselves out as a separate entity. However, I did hear some legal disagreement about whether we were in fact a separate entity. And so rather than having school board members do their own legal research, I'd suggest that we get a legal opinion on that from an attorney. And so I'm going to ask our superintendent to do that, if it's okay. But that being said, I might be contradicting myself with my next remark. So I'm going to ask Sam to ask our superintendent to do that because I've got a comment on the policy, having expressed my strong reservations about setting ourselves up as in principle opposed to the interests of the district most of the time. I just really don't want to go down that road. It reminds me, I'm going to say.
It's not the same at all.
So it just concerns me that it puts out that that appearance, whether it's our intention or not. The last line of this policy says, individual members of the board may consult all council on occasion as necessary to fulfill official duties arising from their board membership. And I don't want that never to be possible, but I think 9 chances out of 10, the way that should be handled is that individual board members should be directed to go through let me say this again. The board president should be the main point of contact between the board and council. The board president or the superintendent should be the main point of contact between our attorneys, between the board and our attorneys, except in very special occasions, because otherwise what we have is, I just think from a management point of view, it's not my desire to disempower board members in any way when they need legal advice, but I just think from a management point of view to have our attorneys, whoever they are, answering to 7 different people is way more, the potential for unnecessary expense is out there, and the potential for unnecessary brain damage is also out there. And so that would be my preference as a way to handle that in the policy, is to say that that the board president or the superintendent should be the main point of contact between the council and the board.
Richard, I haven't heard from you yet.
Well, I guess I want to hear a little bit more. I'm trying to understand what you're asking, Tom. Are you asking for us to have somebody permanently identified as external counsel, or is it like on an ad hoc basis, or?
On an as-needed basis, I would like to have somebody that we have a relationship with, established relationship, that we can go to when the need arises, particularly in the case of, board superintendent type of disputes.
So have one legal firm or somebody identified as the go-to?
Yes. And
whenever
that
we
firm
need
is
it?
not involved in any other school district type of legal work. That's what I'm at.
Now, don't we currently have a relationship like that at the moment?
No. The relationship we have, the firm participates in other school district legal work.
So we have our in-house legal counsel currently,
Right.
and we don't have an external.
We do have an external one, but they're not independent in the sense that they do work with the school district, and the school district, uses their services for various legal affairs, including lawsuits and bond contracts and so on and so forth.
Let's clarify what does currently exist. So Melissa's in-house. She's in-house. She's legal counsel. And then we work closely with Kaplan and Ernest. And the advantage of Kaplan and Ernest is they've got a wide range of knowledge and skills. So that depending upon what the issue is, we have access to a lot of different attorneys. Now, our main legal counsel in Kaplan and Ernest has been Dick Bump, and we work with Dick. And so Melissa, I believe most of us go through you, Melissa, and then you talk with Dick. So if the board wants separate counsel, I'm sure we can arrange that. And, Kaplan and Ernest has been a great firm to work with. So I personally, over 30 years of working with them, have not really had complaints. And I think if you needed a confidential consult that went through our board president, as has been suggested, we can always arrange that. But
Well,
I agree it should go through the board president.
Well, and I think, Tom's alluded to the personnel matter this past spring, where we did hire outside, we went outside of both our in-house counsel and our external counsel. And there is a sentence in here that, calls out the board reserving the right to do that. But if I'm hearing Tom correctly, he's looking for something that perhaps solidifies more than an occasional relationship?
Yeah, and more than an ad hoc relationship. Yeah. I don't want a crisis to come up before, we have to go searching.
So Richard, and then Shelley?
So I guess I'm trying to understand the issue. So is the issue the current relationship we have with the external counsel currently? I don't know if you can answer that, or if that's even a fair question to ask. or do we need to maybe look at a different external counsel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, go ahead, Tom.
I would just like to be able to separate ourselves from any claims that there was some conflict, because we're using attorneys that also get a lot of school district money for other activities. Now, I understand attorney-client type of relationships, but I also understand what people think and say. And I also understand the value of having an independent view of things, not someone in the middle. So it's that extra counsel, there are wisdom in many counselors, it's said, and I would like to have independent legal opinion on some, very sensitive matters.
I guess I'm thinking that with that in mind, that last sentence where it says the board acknowledges that the school district has a need for legal counsel in special areas of law, and that we retain the right, or we reserve the right to obtain independent legal counsel, and should occasions arise requiring legal services, because I believe that the legal services are going to vary and depend and differently, and maybe not all issues that come up will be answered by one particular legal firm. So I'm thinking that the way I read this, I think for me, it sounds like it's sufficient enough to go ahead and move on, because one, if you look at the way it's read here, that we may have need for different legal counsel in special areas of the law, and that we maintain and reserve the right to obtain independent legal services. I think those two in particular, I think, would suffice. Tom, don't you?
Certainly I wouldn't have any policy that says we can't go to someone else if we need to. That would just be bad policy. What I'd like to do is strengthen up, our ability to have, additional legal opinions on issues that are difficult. Also, I would like to see outside legal review on some of our documents, such as contracts, so we get second opinion on those. So I think there are some things that we could do, and it might be more in the beginning than it will be later on, but I would certainly like to feel that out, to have more of a relationship than a, one time if we want to kind of a thing. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, we'll hear from Shelley and then Tina.
Yeah, I don't think this is, this proposal that, Tom's suggesting, or this policy, or the one that I sent a couple years ago, is in any way adversarial. I think that we have found ourselves in situations, and not just recently, but in multiple times since I've been here, where the two entities, the board and the district, have legitimate disagreements. And when we do, I think it's appropriate that we are advised by an independent legal, attorney to help us resolve those disagreements, or give us legal advice on those disagreements. And I don't think that implies anything. It doesn't make us like some crazy board that ran out and got, three of the board members went out and got their own attorney. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the board agreeing that we have someone to go to when these situations arise. And it's come up at least 3 times since I've been on the board in the last 6 years. It's not just once. So I really think and the issue I have with the way this is written is, what it's implied then is that we reserve the right as a board to do this, but it will require a vote to do that. The way this is written, it will require a vote every single time we want to do that. Whereas if we just have somebody on retainer that we turn to in those situations that are complicated, I think it'll be much more natural for us just to reach out and do that. And I don't mean to run up attorney bills or anything like that, but I think anytime you require a vote, then it can go, either way, as opposed to just going to someone who we trust to give us that advice in those situations.
Okay, Tina?
Yeah, I had one clarifying question, and then just a comment about the retainer fees. So Tom, one of the things you mentioned was you wanted to make sure that there were no claims. That there were no claims against the board about the perception of separating the district, and I'm assuming you're talking about claims that are related to perception or public perception, not to any kind of
Not
legal.
just claims, I mean, it could arise in a claim, I suppose, but concerns by the community that we may not be independent.
Okay, but you're not talking about a legal or financial risk that you see as present right now to the school board?
I think that's a possibility, but it's not what's weighing on my mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
because just the word claim is kind of.
The
it's
claim is
such
kind of a legal
you
term,
know,
yeah.
I feel like I don't like really prescriptive policy, so policy that in general would say we have to hire someone and we have to make a budget allocation into perpetuity for a certain work, when I feel that we have enough freedom in this policy to get the lawyers that we need when we need them, is going to work for me. That being said, I'm fine to continue the discussion when we talk about the legal entity, but I feel like we're not going to conclude the discussion now. So I'm not sure, but I mean, I'd be happy to, but that's where my sense is right now.
Okay, other comments, questions? Yeah? Richard?
Yeah, and I agree. I think we need to figure out if in fact there's two legal entities, and then let's continue the discussion.
We can do that. The question is whether or not the board is a separate legal entity from the school district. Is that? We've heard from our council that is not the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, yeah, Tina?
And Shelley or Tom, could you send me the districts that have, in Colorado, that have defined themselves as legal entities and adopted this policy, so I could just look into how it's working and what the retainer situation was like?
Can you send it to the whole board?
I just sent you the policy that I sent the board in 2016, which was taken from other policies. I mean, I think it was lifted from Cherry Creek. I don't think I changed it at all. I think I just lifted a policy that seemed like it would meet our needs at that time.
Okay,
So
and
that's
that
a-
was from Cherry Creek?
I think it was Cherry Creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Send it to everybody?
Yeah, I
Shelley?
just sent it to the whole board.
Because I might follow up with the Cherry Creek board member
Fine.
just to see how it's, yeah.
Okay. Other follow-up, so you can look at that suggested policy. Is a majority of the board feeling like they need another legal opinion on whether we are a separate legal entity? Kathy?
I don't, but if it helps further the conversation, I'm fine.
Okay. Tom? Yeah?
Sam, I mean, I'm just looking through my emails back when I was working on this, and I have an email from a lawyer saying that we are separate legal entities, so I think it's worth investigating.
Okay. Okay, I'll work with Melissa and Cindy on that, and if you, Tom, if you have a suggested wording change for this policy, I think board members would like to see that as well.
Yeah, I think we need another round of this, and
That's fine.
you know, and perhaps another study item before, you know, because it's an important thing, and we want to make sure that we understand it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for your work on this, Melissa. It's to be continued. All right, agenda setting. Of course, we met last week, and we will try to make time for a couple of other items that have come up. Are there other things that we haven't talked about either at our work session or tonight that board members would like to raise at this time? If not, thank you all very much, and we are adjourned.